Okay, we're live.
Okay, I will now call the Planning Committee meeting to order. Welcome everyone to our virtual Planning Committee meeting due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Planning Committee is continuing to practice physical distancing, and all members of council, the executive management team, and the city clerk are participating virtually via video conference. Members of the senior leadership team are not visible, but available to answer questions on the reports on tonight's agenda if needed. We'll start as always with the consent agenda, as we do have two staff reports tonight. Members of Planning Committee can ask that the item be held for further discussion. If it's not held, the report and the motion associated with it is deemed to be approved on consent, and the recommendation will go forward to City Council. And just to be clear, because of the timing, recommendations from tonight's Planning Committee will be going forward to the City Council meeting on Monday, June the 28th. So that will go to Council a week from Monday, everything that comes out of tonight. So we have two staff reports on tonight's agenda. Members of Planning Committee, please indicate if you'd like to hold either one of these. The first one is the zoning bylaw amendment application for 821 Big Bay Point Road. Okay, seeing none, that is approved on consent. Secondly, we have the site plan control requirements for processing for phase 1 of 51 to 75 Bradford Street and 20 Checkley Street, Barrie Lakeshore Developments, Inc. Anybody wish to hold that item? Okay, no holds. And Councillor McCann, I see you've just joined us. I know the first matter is in your ward. Did you wish to hold the first matter on the consent agenda or not?
Thank you, Mary Lehman, but no, I don't.
Okay. All right. So both items have been approved on consent. They will go forward to City Council at the June 28th meeting. And we will move right now to our public meeting. There's one public meeting on tonight's agenda, and it is to consider a city-initiated application for a zoning bylaw amendment, a series of zoning bylaw amendments to the zoning bylaw to facilitate more affordable housing options and to update and refine the intent and contents of the Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw 2009-141. Although registration prior to tonight's meeting was encouraged, you haven't yet registered and you wish to speak, you can email cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 797-5353 and staff will send you the information required to participate in the meeting. We do ask that anyone who registers and wishes to call in from their smartphone, please make sure it is fully charged or your device is plugged in so that we get your full comments. Members of Planning Committee will be listening to the presentation and the comments received, of course, from the public. Public meetings are for the public, but we will not be making comments or debating this item tonight. Members of Planning Committee will have an opportunity to provide our comments regarding this application at a later date when the report is considered by Planning Committee. Members of Planning Committee will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff when it's over, and questions of clarification only. And I think given this is a city-wide zoning bylaw amendment, any members of the committee can ask questions, but we'll try and have the 3-sentence rule in place for questions again tonight, which means you must ask your question in the form of a question in 3 sentences. And of course, members of Planning Committee can seek further clarification or ask more questions of staff in the weeks and months to come on this application. Ms. Banfield, excuse me. We've only done this for 3 years now. Director of Development Services, could you confirm that notification for this public meeting was conducted in accordance with the Planning Act?
Yes, Mayor Lehman, it was.
Thank you very much. So the presentation tonight will be delivered by Ms. Shelby White from Development Services here at the City of Barrie. Ms. White, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mary Lehman. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here. Does that look good to everybody? Perfect. So thank you again very much, Mayor Lehman, and welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening to learn more about some proposed changes to the city's comprehensive zoning bylaw for affordable housing, and to provide us with feedback and input during this important public consultation process. We know that affordable housing is really important for our city, and once we build it, it is here to stay. That is why we need to get it right. So the city is proposing changes to zoning standards that impact the provision of affordable housing for the purpose of facilitating more affordable housing options. Barrie is currently facing a housing affordability crisis. While it's a problem across Canada, it's particularly acute here. This is because historically, we've had one of the highest percentages of home ownership across Canada, combined with limited amounts of rentals available. Frankly, this has created a perfect storm. Housing affordability is no longer just an issue for those making below minimum wage. Our nurses, for instance, are now also having trouble finding an affordable place to live. To mitigate this crisis, we created an affordable housing strategy and are addressing this issue in a variety of ways. Gradually increasing density in neighborhoods through second suites and detached accessory dwelling units is an effective and essential tool for bringing more rentals to market. Some of the changes proposed are intended to address potential conflicts emerging as more detached accessory dwelling units are built in existing neighborhoods by updating development standards for these, as well as for second suites. Other changes being proposed are intended to address possible barriers to affordability, clarify definitions, and improve bylaw implementation. A detailed overview of the draft proposed amendments have been included on tonight's agenda in Appendix A of my memo to Council. In the following slides, I'm going to provide an overview of the proposed changes being considered, which can be summarized as follows. First, deleting all minimum dwelling unit size requirements from the bylaw. Second, updating some definitions to improve clarity and for consistency with provincial definitions. Third, making some changes to our non-conforming use provisions as they relate to adding dwelling units into existing buildings. 4, updating the standards for second suites. 5, introducing new development standards for detached accessory dwelling units, which would replace our current practice of just applying the accessory buildings and structure standards to these. And lastly, introducing accessory residential uses as a permitted use in the institutional I zone. So the first change proposed is to delete all minimum dwelling unit floor area requirements from the zoning bylaw. Currently, our bylaw requires a range of minimum dwelling unit size requirements depending on the zone and unit type. All of these currently exceed the minimum size requirements in the Ontario Building Code. This means that today, if someone wants to come in and build smaller, more affordable units, they could be faced with additional planning applications, which adds time, cost, and uncertainty to projects. We recognize that there's a growing interest in smaller, more compact units, including micro suites and tiny homes, because they can be affordable and sustainable design options. By removing this requirement from our bylaw, we could facilitate the construction of smaller, more affordable units. All units would still be designed to meet the standards of the building code. The second change proposed is to update some of our definitions. So we have proposed to change our definitions for basement, first story, and story to match that in the building code. This will make our zoning and building permit review process a little bit easier by ensuring we are using the same definitions. We have also proposed some updates to the definitions for detached accessory dwelling unit, duplex dwelling, second suite, and multiple dwelling unit to better distinguish between built forms so that the bylaw is easier to understand and apply. The changes to our definitions for detached accessory dwelling unit and second suite are also intended to make them more consistent with the Planning Act, which requires municipalities to permit these uses in certain types of homes. So our new second suite definition being proposed is an accessory dwelling unit that is located within a single detached dwelling, semi-detached dwelling unit, or street townhouse dwelling unit and is subordinate to the principal unit. And a very similar new definition for a detached accessory dwelling unit is an accessory dwelling unit that is located within a detached accessory building on the same property as a single detached dwelling, semi-detached dwelling unit, duplex, or street townhouse dwelling unit and is subordinate to the principal unit. Lastly, while no changes have been proposed to parking permissions, we are proposing to include a definition of tandem parking space in the bylaw to make it clearer that this parking arrangement is 2 spaces in a row, not 3 or more. The third group of changes being proposed are to our non-conforming use provisions in section 4.4. The first change would remove the current permissions that essentially allow the removal of dwelling units from a building, even when doing so would not comply with the permitted uses on the property today. The second change is to try and make it easier to add additional dwelling units into existing legal nonconforming buildings, such as adding a basement unit into a multiplex. This would only apply in instances where the additional units are already a permitted use on the property today. This change has been brought forward in response to a number of minor variance applications we've received, where people want to convert basements or attics into additional affordable housing units inside of existing buildings, but because they are older and do not meet today's zoning standards, they need to go to the Committee of Adjustment first. Any additions to buildings would still need to meet today's standards, and these projects would still be required to meet parking standard requirements as well as any building code requirements. The fourth change proposed is some updates to the existing second suite standards. These will apply citywide, including within the Salem and Hewitt's communities. First, we're looking to update the language in our zoning bylaw to be more consistent with the province, which requires us to permit an additional residential unit in a detached house, semi-detached house, or a row townhouse. The current bylaw language is a bit ambiguous, so this change will improve clarity about where second suites can be built to improve bylaw implementation. The other change is to remove the minimum unit size and put in place a maximum unit size. So currently, the zoning bylaw requires second suites to be subordinate to the principal dwelling, or in other words, smaller. This new provision would allow for up to 45% of the house to be used as a second suite, or the entire basement of a bungalow, and will ensure that second suite units remain slightly smaller than the main dwelling unit. The fifth set of changes are in the introduction of new development standards for detached accessory dwelling units. I'd like to start off by clarifying that the intention of this amendment is not to restrict this use or make it harder to build them, but rather to ensure these units follow appropriate land use and urban design guidelines so that they fit in with the existing context of the neighborhood. These proposed changes, again, would apply throughout the city, including the Salem and Hewitt's communities, and reflect the provincial requirement for us to permit the use of a residential unit in a building or structure ancillary to a detached house, semi-detached house, or row house. We are also proposing to allow these as an accessory use to a duplex dwelling, and for greater clarity, have stated that a detached accessory dwelling unit can only contain one dwelling unit. The key word to pay attention to from the provincial requirement is ancillary, meaning that detached accessory dwelling units are and always were intended to be smaller, detached add-ons to the main home. Essentially, they are a second suite located in an accessory building in the backyard, not a full second house on a property. For this reason, in addition to removing minimum unit size requirements to permit tiny homes, new maximum unit sizes have been proposed, allowing for a detached unit to be up to 45% of the gross floor area of the principal building, just like we proposed for a second suite, but capped at a maximum of 65 square meters, which is about 700 square feet. No changes have been proposed to the maximum lot coverage permissions of 10% for all accessory buildings and structures on a lot, including detached accessory dwelling units. Restrictions to prevent detached accessory dwelling units from having a basement have been proposed in response to concerns from the city's building and zoning staff regarding the possible illegal conversion of detached accessory dwelling units with basements into 2 units, which poses a safety concern. Minimum driveway lengths for detached garages that contain a detached accessory dwelling unit have been proposed to ensure that adequate parking areas are provided and that they are set back far enough from the municipal right-of-way when they are located on corner lots, should a second driveway be sought. Currently, detached accessory dwelling units are only required to meet the minimum development standards for accessory buildings and structures, such as garages, sheds, pool houses, that kind of thing. The city has heard concerns from residents that these current standards allow for detached accessory dwelling units to be located very close to property lines, posing concerns regarding privacy and backyards, and that their size and associated parking areas are taking up too much space, which leaves little green space for outdoor amenity areas and increases the impervious surface area on these properties. We've also received a number of applications to the Committee of Adjustment seeking variances to the current maximum height to allow for a unit to be located above a detached garage. And staff feel this warrants greater public consultation to determine whether this style of detached accessory dwelling unit is something we want to permit in the city of Barrie. In response to this, staff are proposing that new standards specific to detached accessory dwelling units be introduced. The proposed changes would allow for both single-story and two-story detached accessory units, subject to different development standards. And these two-story units would only be permitted where the first story is used as a detached garage with the dwelling unit located above it. The maximum height being proposed for a single-story unit has been increased from 4 meters to 4.5, with up to 6.5 meters permitted for a two-story unit. Interior side yard setbacks are proposed to increase from 0.6 meters or 2 feet to 1.2 meters, which is consistent with the requirements for a principal dwelling. Similarly, exterior side yard setbacks to a street have also been proposed to increase from 1 meter to 3 meters, which again matches the requirements for a principal dwelling. The minimum rear yard setback has been proposed to increase from 0.6 meters to 1.2 for single-story units and to 3 meters for two-story units. Lastly, we propose the introduction of a minimum lot area requirement for detached accessory dwelling units. The intention of this is really to ensure that the lots that these are being located on are sufficiently sized to accommodate the main house, the detached accessory dwelling unit, required parking and driveways, and landscaped open space areas for all units. The below mapping is a summary of the impact of these new minimum lot size requirements. So this map includes all properties that are zoned to permit detached accessory dwelling units. The properties that are shown in red would no longer be permitted to have a detached accessory dwelling unit as of right because they're less than 400 square meters. Blue properties are large enough for a single-story unit, and the green properties would be permitted to have either a single-story unit or a two-story unit. And it's important to point out that these maps only consider lot area. They haven't taken into account whether other development requirements can be met, such as setbacks to lot lines, parking, and maximum lot coverage. And I know these are a little bit small, so I'm just going to zoom in for you on a few different areas of the city to give you a bit of an idea of the impact of this proposed minimum lot area requirement. So again, the red areas would be those that would no longer be large enough to permit a unit as of right. The blue would be permitted a single story, and the green a single story or a two-story. So this is the north section of Barrie. Here's the southwest section of Barrie. And then the southeast section of Barrie. And finally, the last change that we're considering through this amendment is to permit accessory residential uses in the institutional zone. So currently there are some specific residential uses such as group homes, assisted living facilities, and social services that are permitted in the institutional zone. This change is proposing to add residential uses in conjunction with permitted institutional uses as a permitted accessory use to allow for mixed residential institutional development and the addition of rental units to existing or planned institutional sites, such as churches, above libraries, or in social service facilities. This would essentially allow for things like community hubs and could encourage the addition of purpose-built rental units on sites that are already well connected to existing and planned services. Development Services has noted a growing interest in providing mixed institutional residential development from churches as well as social housing providers, where co-location of these can be mutually beneficial, and it makes sense economically to mix market rental with social housing and other institutional uses. And there are some examples of this in the city already, such as Victoria Village, as well as outside of our municipality in places like Toronto, where they put residential units above things like libraries. So residential uses in the institutional zone would be subject to appropriate development standards based on built form. And by only permitting dwelling units as an accessory use, we can ensure that the institutional use remains a primary use on the site. So as a reminder, no decision is being made at this public meeting. We are here to listen tonight. We know that we have to get it right for all of our residents. While these zoning bylaw amendments offer one step forward as a response to what we've been hearing and are aligned with what comparable municipalities in Ontario are implementing, we're here tonight to hear your feedback so that we can build more affordable housing in a way that's truly right for Barrie. City staff will be taking all of the comments received tonight and those provided in writing before this public meeting into consideration before we bring a recommendation report to council for consideration with an updated proposed bylaw. Given the summer recess, we anticipate this report back will likely take place in September of this year. And at that time, we'll also bring forward any required updates to our second suites registration bylaw, as well as implementation tools and guides. And with that, I'd like to conclude my formal presentation and once again, thank everyone for their attention. And just again, we really appreciate everyone who has taken the time to provide written comments or join us this evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. White. Just a reminder, folks that are watching, if you do wish to speak at tonight's public meeting, email cityclerks, all one word, cityclerks@barrie.ca, or call 797-5353, and our staff will give you the instructions on how to join and give your comments at tonight's meeting. We do have a number of folks who registered to speak tonight. I'll call them each in turn. Just to ask that as you join the meeting, because it's a formal public meeting under the Planning Act, we do need your name and address for the record of the meeting. So if you can give us your address when you come in, that would be helpful, and then proceed with your comments. And again, staff will be noting all of the comments made tonight, and we'll be responding to those as part of the staff report at a later date. So I will dive into our list. I will now invite Brady McDonald into the call. Mr. McDonald, welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lehman, and thank you for all the committee members and councilors here on the meeting. So, okay, here we go. So thanks for putting me first up. So I've got a bunch of notes here. So I'll just maybe explain who I am and my address. I'll give you one of them. There's lots, but 21 or 28 Grove Street East would be one of them. There's about 50 other ones, but so my name is Brady McDonald. I'm the president of BK Real Estate Investing. My wife and I own that company, and we started business in Barrie in 2015, where we've created over 100 second suites throughout Barrie, Simcoe County, and we've built over actually 225 detached accessory units throughout the city. So I can confidently say that we are the leading builder and owner of these types of properties within the city, in the surrounding area, and have a very in-depth understanding of the local market, both the rental market and the feasibility of actually creating these types of dwelling units on the properties within the city, as well as construction and the feasibility of, again, actually creating the supply in the market. So the city of Barrie is considering amending the bylaw to facilitate more affordable and better housing options. So as an expert in the field, I can confidently tell you that these proposed changes, more related to the accessory dwelling units, will contribute to an affordability problem. And I'll get into that a little bit deeper. I would also like to acknowledge, actually, because we were one of the very first ones to start building these within the city in January 2020, that I was blown away on how fast the city adopted that, because that is the city we know. We're quick adapters. We adapt. We want housing in Barrie. We understand that there's a problem, and I was blown away that on how fast you guys acted. So applaud for you guys. So and it's been great. It's been a pleasure getting to where we are today. So again, the way that the proposed changes are currently written will not contribute to making more affordable units. And I can explain this in a bit. They will further restrict the creation of new units and decrease actually supply, which will result in affordability issues across the board. So, and I'm going to give you a whole bunch of recommendations, and I'll break it down into my points with the problem, or my concerns with the recommendations, but then also some resolutions I feel that are somewhat reasonable. And I think that would not only satisfy the city, but also the developers and the homeowners that want to build these, but also I can assume that the neighbors who have complained, we need to also address those concerns as well. So first off, we need to address why these things came into town. I know it's already been slightly been mentioned, but the reason that these third auxiliary units are brought in is because of Ontario, an Ontario Act, right? So we have a huge, massive shortage in housing, not only in Barrie, but in the entire country. And affordability is directly related to supply and demand, right? So a large thing of what I'm recognizing and what these bylaw changes are going to create is it's going to create them more difficult to build units that are that will satisfy not just one demographic in the rental pool, but all of them. Okay, so the proposed changes are going to allow for like very small units that are directly, that won't be 2 bedrooms, and I'll get into that shortly. In general, it is evident that proposed changes were approved. If they were approved, then new detached accessory units that would be built to the standards would only provide housing for a very small demographic, and that is it's primarily excluding 2-bedroom units. That's what these proposed changes would allow for. Again, I'm going to give you my recommendations as to what some of these standards may look like, and I'd love to work with you in that, with you guys in that in the future. So just to give you some background as to who are living in these units. So in our portfolio, we have created everything from bachelors, 1-bedroom units with a den, as well as comfortable 2-bedroom units. Like, these are not 2-bedroom units that are beyond the space required, because as an investor, I obviously don't want to make larger spaces. It costs a lot more, but I do want to make housing that is affordable and has a demand, right? So that is what we've specialized in. Our property, none of our units have been over 800 square feet. Most of them sit around 750 square feet. The tenant profile ranges from is a diverse range from 20 to 30-year-old professionals to 50 to 60-year-old people who are downsizing and selling their homes. The strongest demand of this has been young couples in the age range of 25 to 35. And we have found them all to be obviously very responsible and take care of the properties as if they were their own. And maybe this is the right time to speak about, because I have been on many of a committee of adjustments meetings and listened to a lot of public outcry when we are trying to create housing within the city. And a lot of the outcry is related to, these people, they put 8 people or 10 people live in these places, and this horror story and that horror story. But the reality is that is not the normal situation. Most tenants are amazing, and they're just like you and I. Like, for example, the last public, like, we're still renting a house right now. So there's, you can't, we need to make sure that we're not looking at tenants from like the worst ones. Like, the most people that live beside us are just as normal as, our tenants. So these are the following breakdowns of proposed changes that I oppose, but also agree with. There's I'm here to help solve this problem, because we've heard tonight, we do want to get this right on this next attempt. So lot size, I do oppose the change to restrict the creation of detached accessory dwellings to a minimum lot size for a single story. Is this a little bit confusing to me, but because because we are going to allow 2 stories. What this will do, it will control and restrict the minimum size of the units. And I know that part of this strategy is to create more affordable units. Well, that, so then we're limiting how small they can be, but in the next breath, we're going to see that in a little bit lower, we're going to see that we're going to also limit how big they're going to be. So it's a bit strange to me. And I think there is solutions to create the best types of housing, right, that take up the proper square footage for the property, but also satisfy the most amount of people that would actually occupy those, right? Instead of just calling it like minimums and maximums. So I think there's a solution in between, and I do have suggestions for that. So in my opinion, is that between the current bylaw stating that the max unit size right now, the max unit size that it can't be larger than 10% of the lot area, paired with the Ontario Building Code minimums, is actually the best way to control it. And there may be one addition where, and I won't get too technical. I will save some of this stuff. I guess I will send an email to everybody here, and it can be shared that on I think. Or maybe we could have a meeting, but we can actually get a little bit more technical, where we can really control how do we actually create the best units that will satisfy the most amount of people in our community, because I think that's important to think about. Yes, we need the smallest units. We don't need massive units, but we need to make sure we satisfy the most amount of people within our community. So the unit setbacks, I totally agree with all those changes. Totally understand that, like, part of a lot of these concerns that the neighbors are having are that the setbacks for a detached garage, which is the same as an auxiliary unit, is relatively close. Totally get it. And I don't think that the changes that the staff have proposed will really affect what could actually be built. Like those setbacks are not going to really affect, who can live in these units. But some of these other things that we're talking about do affect who can live in these, which is affecting supply, and whether they'll also affect whether they get built or not. So I totally agree with that stuff. Basement restrictions. I personally haven't. So there's you have to understand, like when the market is so crazy, and like when we look at buying something and building this, we first have to build a second suite, because financially the math doesn't work if you want to just cover your costs on a single family home. So you have to build a second suite. That worked for a long time. Now it doesn't work in the city of Barrie because the properties are so expensive. So the only way to make something work is to have the third unit financially, from an investment standpoint, to actually cover your costs. Okay, so I personally haven't built any basements, but I do intend, like, if on certain lots where, for example, if you could build a 400 square foot unit now, right, 400 square foot unit, the demographic that wants that, I can tell you out of experience building bachelor units, a couple of them, it's very hard to rent because there's not that much demand for that. So if we could build a 400 square foot unit with a 350 square foot basement, you'd have a nice, very, again, small footprint. It's not going to interfere with the neighbors as much as 800 or 1,000 or two, whatever else could be built. But it allows it satisfies that largest demographic that is looking for housing in the city. So I think they should be allowed. I would suggest creating a finished floor area for a coach house, maximum unit of, or maximum size. So right now the bylaw they're suggesting is I believe it's 400 meters square. Sorry, yeah, it's 400. It's 699 square feet is what they're saying the max size should be. Okay, that is one bedroom and a den. Okay, so legally, like if you actually want enough room for a couch, a TV, a small dining table, and an island, you can't have both. 2 bedrooms that one would fit it like a queen and the other one a single, in a 4-piece bath. That is what we can build is 750 square feet, right? So I think we need to make sure we hit that as a minimum. 800 square feet would be generous, but 699 square feet, I'm telling you, because I've built many of them. And if I could build them that size, I would, because it would be cheaper for me. That is 1 bedroom and a den. So you're going to rule out most of the demographic of the people who are looking for housing in our community. So that's what I would recommend. I would recommend basements be allowed, but don't exceed the maximum square footage of livable space that another bylaw standard that would set, which would be the changing the 699 square feet to 800. That's my recommendation. Size restrictions. So I do oppose. They do have this recommendation with the 45% gross floor area. Gross floor area is like, I know, like I've done tons of stuff up in Midland. A lot of places utilize this term. I'm not sure why, because it really doesn't change anything. But when you actually, the problem with it is that if you actually look at the definition of gross floor area, it is the sum of areas of every floor above grade. So if you have a single family home, for example, if you have a bungalow, right, you only have 1 floor above grade. If that bungalow was 1,000 square feet, you could only build a detached accessory unit of 450 square feet, right? Most properties that have space to accommodate their recommended 699, you would never be able to get there. So it's almost like you'd never actually be able to accommodate their max based on this recommendation here of this 45% gross floor area. It would obviously have to change the definition from what the building code says. So I'd recommend the size restrictions be 800 square feet, whatever that works out in meters. And the reason why is because the largest demographic of people need 2 bedrooms, right? They can't legally live in 1 bedroom plus a den. That's not safe, right? So that is where 699 lands out. But 700 that's where most people in our community live. Like we have lots of people sharing units, and that's what also creates affordable housing, is when people do share, and right, so it's sisters and brothers, it's parents and a kid, and you obviously have lots of families, couples or single parents with a child that don't want to live in bachelor units, right? So we need to accommodate for this. Because
Brady, sorry, Mr. McDonald, I hate to interrupt you because I know you are speaking from expertise in building so many units, and I agree that you've got a lot of great detail here. However, we do have more than a dozen more speakers tonight, and I want to be able to give everybody that time to be able to speak to Planning Committee. So I am just going to ask you if you can try and wrap up your remarks relatively soon. There is every opportunity to provide all of this detail to all members of committee subsequent to the meeting, but just for the purpose of allowing everybody a chance to speak tonight, I got to nudge you along a bit.
absolutely, Jeff. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'll move ahead. All right, where was I? Okay, so I think I talked about size. So I think when we just look about size, I think our solution is first we need to look at the demographics that actually need these properties. Second, we need to look at what's reasonable as far as size. And then what we need to do is, what actually helps the affordability, which is sharing. And then lastly, I think what we need to do is sit down and have a meeting with the experts like myself, designers, planners, the city, and have these discussions. I think that is the most reasonable next steps to make sure that we do this right. So, I think I've pretty much hit all of those. The one other thing that I would like to talk to you about real quick is that these restrictions are going to restrict again the creation of housing. They will not allow for like a parent with a kid. They won't allow friends to share, etc. And financially, you're not going to be like, for us to build these things in the developers, like we personally, if up to these standards, we would have created 75 less units since 2020 or in 2020 alone. Okay, that's a straight up fact because these restrictions just don't make it feasible for us. But one other thing the reason why we personally went this route, because one of my goals in 2020 was to build 12 plexes and 20 plexes. If you look at the development charges, and let's say, for example, you want to build something in Barrie that is a rental pool, because that's what we're into. If you look at the development charges within the city, it's like they're astronomical. It would have cost me close to $800,000 to do a 12-plex unit. There's obviously that's why nobody's building these things, but I would have loved to build these types of things also on our properties. With regards to neighbors complaining, I totally understand, but what we do need to recognize is that they haven't complained. There wouldn't have been too many complaints if it was just a garage or if it was a pool house beside. But when people actually need to live in housing, a safe place to live, it's just it's weird to me that this is where everybody complains. And what I strongly suggest, I'm here to work with the city. I think I've got the most experience to reasonably give suggestions, and I would love to work with you guys. And what we need to do is address my concerns, the city's concerns, the neighbors' concerns, but also we really need to look at the demographics who need this housing more than we do. And that's where I'll finish.
Okay, tons in that. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for being here tonight, for giving us those comments. And again, I'd encourage you to send a lot of that detail along subsequent to the meeting to city staff. They can make sure all members of the committee get it. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm just checking my list here. Our next registered speaker is Chris Franco. Mr. Franco, welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you to the committee for taking my comments. I would agree with Brady McDonald and the concerns that I have about accessory dwelling units, as well as the second suites and the restrictions that are being implemented by the planning committee or being proposed. I am a rental housing provider in the city of Barrie. I own and operate about 20 properties in Barrie. I have been able to use the second suite program in order for me to add more additional units onto the marketplace for the city of Barrie. Right now, I cannot keep up with demand. Now I've started to get into the accessory dwelling units, and now I'm reading that there are more things that they want to introduce rather than what was previously presented before. Now, I have several houses that are 600 to 700 square feet, single-story bungalows. With this proposed planning idea, I would only be able to put in a 270 square foot accessory dwelling unit. That is 45% of the gross floor area. In this particular scenario, it would not be feasible for me to put in an accessory dwelling unit in this type of property. This property is located in Ward 2, and that I wouldn't be able to put another unit there. So thus I can't put another unit onto the marketplace to help with people looking for a place to rent. With the 10% lot coverage at my property line being 40 by 110, I would be able to put a 440 square foot accessory dwelling unit in my backyard. So there's the difference there that I don't agree with this proposed change. Now, we're looking at two different types of accessory dwelling units, one being a 1-story and a 2-story. Now, the comments by the planning committee was that there was concerns about privacy and neighbors complaining about setbacks. Well, why would we allow a detached accessory dwelling unit in a backyard, which it cannot be in a front yard, to have a garage and living space above the garage? Privacy, people looking over other people's fences, I don't know. That is something that I think needs to be considered in order for neighbors to be satisfied with their concerns about people overlooking onto their backyard space. Now, the basement component here, you're already putting a pad on that lot coverage that you're going to be putting this accessory dwelling unit. I do not see why there is resistance to putting in a basement. Now, the planner did make a comment about having concerns, or the building department having concerns about illegal units being constructed in these accessory dwelling units. There are not that many accessory dwelling units that have been constructed in Barrie with basements. I would like to see if there is any information or any complaints or any solstice to this type of information where it would alleviate the fact that there is a concern about having basements. To me, if you have a pad that's 400 square feet, if I can use that space in the basement for a single family to live in, that's additional living space, and I'm going into the ground. I'm not going up. So it does provide more privacy for the neighbors versus going up a story and having a detached garage. Now, what I found, Barrie leads in rental rates. PadMapper ranks us number 4. With these proposed changes, I can guarantee you that we're going to continue to go up that scale. As more restrictions get introduced, or more certain cost recoveries are not able to be achieved, we're just not going to build these units. So that's something that I have concerns about. Bill 108 was introduced by the provincial government to create more homes and more choices. And I think the city did a great job in January 2020. And now with some neighbors having some concerns, I get that it works both ways, but I still think that the city should continue to adopt that 10% coverage. Mind you, that you can have the setbacks and those introductions. I think those are a great idea. Now, with the tandem parking definition, the planner was talking about back-to-back parking. My concern regarding that is we're going to have an accessory dwelling unit on this property. We're going to have a second suite and a single family. I don't know if many of you have kids, but it seems like everybody has cars. So if we have only 4 spots, that limits also the pool of people that we can rent to. I think the definition for the tandem parking may need to be readjusted, or they need to look at something else to try to solidify that position. Other than that, I think it should be held for more further discussion with experts like Brady McDonald, Colby Marshall. I'm a second suite guy. I'm still getting into this kind of component, but I'm here to help the city try and get as many units onto the market as possible. And we've had a developer step back from developing in our city and halting because of certain city council decisions. I just think that in order for us to keep the moving wheel going, We need to make sure that we have an engaging process with the people that are actually doing the work in the city by using their own money to invest into more units so that people can have a place to stay. I would like to thank the committee for taking my my comments. My name is Chris Franco, and I'll give you one of my addresses that I own. Let's go with 72 Innisfil Street. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Franco. Next, we have Colby Marshall. Mr. Marshall, welcome to Planning Committee.
Hi, can you hear me? Perfect.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Colby Marshall. I'm a local realtor, and we have also a company that basically we specialize in intensifying properties. We started off similar to Brady and Franco there for intensifying with second suites. We also have intensified into multifamily properties, triplexes, fiveplexes, sixplexes. Also now we are getting into the accessory dwellings as well. I just wanted to kind of touch on a couple of points that everyone else has and just say what I thought. Essentially, you know, Barry came out of the gate, had a great bylaw. We've been seeing these accessory dwelling units be going up everywhere. Now the new proposed bylaw, I have a couple issues with some of the matters that are at hand. A couple of things that I want to touch on are the basements and the 2 stories. So the proposed 2 stories, you know, we've got a lot of neighbors that are complaining about privacy and things like that. Having a 2-story garden suite, I can see being very problematic, being on the forefront of dealing with these neighbors that do have some of the issues. We try to be cordial as possible and, you know, take into consideration as many other demands for privacy. A lot of the lots that will support the garden suites are in the older East End. They are 1,000 square foot bungalows, you know, your 60 by 120 foot lot sizes, especially if the minimum lot sizes go through. These are going to be the only areas that are going to be really allowed to have these garden suites. So if you're to have a built form of a bungalow or raised bungalow, having a 2-story unit isn't really a good idea in my mind. It'll make the neighbors more upset. You know, even if you do have 1 slab on grade and a unit above, there would still be a concern of changing that garage into an illegal unit as well. So the concern of a basement versus a garage, I think, you know, it's about the same chance of either one. At the end of the day, you know, the built forms are bungalows in those areas, and they don't take the basement into this new gross floor area point as well. So again, most of these bungalows are 1,000 square feet. That will allow for a 450 square foot garden suite. That's a very tiny space. If you go home and measure that out, you know, that's going to not be somewhere where I'd want to live. You know, having a maximum floor area of close to 800 square foot footprint is where I would see it. And again, including the basements adds more usable square footage. It also gives the tenants some comfort of having a forced air natural gas furnace and a central air conditioning system. A lot of these slab on grade systems, you know, they have one central blower. They don't go into all the bedrooms. So having the basement does give the tenants some more additional comforts as well. So that's why we would support the basements over going to 2 stories. And, you know, the increased setbacks and things like that, I get a lot of that can be addressed through the Ontario Building Code as well. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. But yeah, that's basically it. I don't want to reiterate the same as everybody else. I would be willing to volunteer my time, similar to Brady and Mr. Franco. You know, if you guys wanted to do a committee, discuss more how we can all work together and get things going, I would be more than happy to do that. And I want to thank everybody for having me out today.
Thanks very much, Mr. Marshall. Did we get Mr. Marshall's address, Madam Clerk?
Oh, I'm at 304 Little Avenue.
Thanks very much. Great, thanks for your comments. Next up tonight, we have Adam Mobbs. Adam, welcome to Planning Committee. Or do we have? Doesn't look like it. Madam Clerk, do we see Mr. Mobbs? You're on mute.
He was on and he seemed to have dropped off. So Hopefully
Okay.
he'll rejoin. We also do not have Mr. James.
Okay, we will come back at the end and hopefully they will rejoin us. Next, then we have Jennifer Van Gennep on behalf of Scatterberry chapter. Ms. Van Gennep, welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Lehman and Planning Committee. The Scatterberry chapter wishes to thank the Planning Committee for the opportunity to voice our support for City staff's proposed amendments to these zoning bylaws related to affordable housing. Oh, sorry, I forgot. My name is Jennifer Van Gennep, and I only have one address, and it is 29 Twist Drive. As we understand it, a review of these bylaws came as a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Monitoring Report, and the proposed changes are an effort to both remove barriers and provide clarity regarding the creation of additional units in existing dwellings. Converting basements and attics into apartments, backyard tiny homes, and other creative ways of adding additional housing on existing lots in our neighborhoods are really great ways to create affordable housing options in our city. Considering the affordable housing crisis we are in, bylaw amendments that make it easier to build affordable housing are welcome. These bylaw amendments also seem to address some of the size and height requirements and set out requirements for the amount of green space that needs to remain on lots. Our hope is that these clarifications and standards will quiet some of the NIMBYism that can surround these projects. Coincidentally, this meeting is taking place during YIMBY week. YIMBY stands for Yes in My Backyard. And the purpose of this campaign is to remind us all that everyone deserves a safe, affordable, hopeful place to call home. And when that is the case, our entire community benefits. We do believe that these bylaw amendments can help us get there. However, what we have seen is that just because a housing unit costs less to build, that does not necessarily mean it will cost less to rent. Landlords tend to pocket any savings and charge whatever the market will bear. A reminder that in our city right now, we often see basement apartments or these accessory dwellings built in backyards go for $1,800 to $2,000 a month. So, while it's outside the scope of the bylaw amendments, we continue to urge the city to consider all the tools at your disposal to control rent prices, such as caps or incentives in exchange for caps on those new units, similar to the second suites grants from the county, but also vacancy taxes and policies that would protect existing affordable housing stock from being scooped up by real estate investment conglomerates, such as Core Development Group Limited, that has announced its plans to start buying up large quantities of single-family homes in Barrie to rent out at a huge profit to their investors. With the financialization of housing, housing has become, for many, a commodity to invest in first and a home second. When housing is hoarded, what we all understand as the basic economic principle of supply and demand doesn't apply in the same way. More supply, at least at the rates we are able to produce it, is not bringing the housing costs down. Refusing to put policies in place to protect the right to housing is not a neutral move. It directly benefits those with wealth to invest, and it forces those without that wealth into precarious housing, food insecurity, or even homelessness. As always, we thank you for the opportunity to provide comments. We support the bylaw amendment, and we remain at your disposal as you work to address the affordable housing shortage in our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Van Gennep, for your comments and for being here tonight. Just looking down my list here, our next speaker is Franca Marinelli. Welcome to Planning Committee. And we can't hear you yet, Franca. I don't know if you're on mute.
Good evening, everyone.
There we go. Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you for the time to speak. My name is Phil Marinelli, and I'm here with Clint Tyler.
Oh, we can't hear you now, Mr. Marinelli.
I'm getting feedback here. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. I was getting feedback. Once again, it's Phil Marinelli with Clint Tyler. We're members of the Ward 1 Residents Association, and I'm a little concerned about, well, a lot concerned about the proposal that I heard today. I've always been of the opinion that when we add affordable housing, it should come with its own separate land, and instead of basically cramming extra people into a given space. Expansion, that's not really expansion. That's just more people per square foot. I'm concerned about the congestion that's going to be on the streets. You're going to have more cars. What about the infrastructure needed for extra power used, garbage collection, that sort of thing? I think it's going to make for a cramped neighborhood, and I would use the term ghetto to describe it. If you're going to have wall-to-wall people, you should have extra space to put these people, not cramming them into your backyard. Clint, do you want to add to that?
If you don't mind. First of all, every time a resident speaks, it sounds like we're being told it's NIMBYism. And that's what we're hearing from the dozens of people we're talking to, that anytime they say, look, we want our neighborhoods to include residents who are renting and who own, but we want neighborhoods. And every time we talk about having guidelines that will allow us to have healthy neighborhoods and not places like ours where we have rental units with 8 people in them each. We have 3 houses on this street within the last year had 18 cars parked in the 3 houses, okay? What I'm saying is and now we're gonna allow them to build a second unit behind it and add 2 to 4 more people? I mean, it's not about, it's not fair to the people as well, the tenants as well as ourselves. This is not NIMBYism. It's how do we build a quality community? The one question I do have is this. Is this mandatory for the city of Barrie to do this through the province? Or does the city of Barrie have a right to limit how many it's going to do and where? And does the 75-meter rule continue? Because right now, the 75-meter rule of rental units is not being enforced at all in terms of people are building side by side. So if we're going to go with this, are we saying that these can be on rental places that are going to be rental properties, or anybody's house can have one? That's one of my questions, okay? The second one is, when I hear about all these experts, having been an expert in another field of psychotherapy for many years, I know how important it is every now and then to ask the patient how things are going. And right now, I haven't heard anybody ask the patient here how it's going. I'm hearing people telling us basically, it's NIMBYism because you're concerned about the quality of health. It is not NIMBYism when I knock on these doors and I have women crying because they don't know what to do in their neighborhood because they feel alienated from a city that's not listening to them. And I know, look at you passed a pilot project for this area, and it's wonderful you did that. And it's courage. It was unanimous. And thank you so much. It gave us hope. But now it's the next stage. The next thing you see this, I have people telling me, because I'm out walking door to door now, passing out leaflets, and they're saying, are you telling me that every neighbor I have can put up one of these extra houses? I didn't know, okay? And is there any limit to this? Because it comes, I really believe all businessmen are good-hearted and greed has nothing to do with it about wanting to make profit, But on the other hand, I do think there is a profit motive in this. When I read the Toronto Star saying they're willing to put $3 billion into buying properties to buy rental homes and run them like a corporate entity, this concerns me. The other point I want to ask you very clearly is it possible to have a task force, a working group that would include residents for once? Because, some of you are experts about where to put the toilets and basements. We're experts about having to live in these places once they're here. And how do we make a community? And having been a community organizer and a social worker for 45 years, I really think the human beings involved should have as much of a say as someone who knows how to build a basement with a furnace in it. And so if I sound harsh, it's a passion. The pain I'm hearing going door to door is not funny. And what I'm hearing is people are feeling alienated from their government. Because yes, where else would people say logically, we're going to stuff more and more people into less and less space and keep charging them more money? Why do it? We're not solving the problem because people can't afford it. I have clients. I'm a volunteer therapist a day a week because I'm almost 80. So I've been doing it for the last 10 years for free, a day a week. I have people working 3 jobs to pay the rent right now at minimum wage because they're paying $1,800, $1,900 a month. They can't. So anyways, I'm just throwing that out. The big one is it possible for the residents to have a formal say either residents association. Now, you're going to say we have our counselors, and thank goodness we have the one we have. Okay, I'm prejudiced. But the point is, our counselors do a good job. But sometimes it's good to hear it from the folks. And it's not just griping. We want a good, healthy community. And it's not about, how many dollars can I make off the square footage if I do this? It's about having, and also having the bylaws enforced in a certain way. So the number one thing we're asking for, can it be considered to have a task force in which representatives from residents be there? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to speak.
Thank you both very much for being here and giving us that perspective. Appreciate that. And we do just need an address for you. Sorry, gentlemen, but for the record of the public meeting.
Okay, 40 Rosenfeld Drive in Ward 1, and for Clint, it's 44 Rosenfeld.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is John McNeil. Mr. McNeil, welcome to Planning Committee.
Good evening, Mayor Lehman and members of the City Council. Thank you for letting me have a few moments to chat. I am speaking on behalf of the residents that live beside these second suites and accessory units. I very much feel that the City of Barrie is doing a great job, and the majority of the people building them are doing a wonderful job as well. But the City of Barrie needs to police and put forth a little more due diligence in making sure that standards are upheld on all properties that are being converted into multi-residence rentals for the benefit of those around. Having lived through the construction of one of these rentals, I can say that not everybody is out to ensure a quality build and or benefiting the street as a whole. It very much just seems that it is more so in efforts to shoehorn as much profit into a property as possible. And I feel that more needs to be done about this. That's really all I have to say. I live at 100 Daphne.
Thanks very much, Mr. McNeil. Appreciate you giving those remarks as well. Next speaker we have tonight is Kathy Kolbach. Ms. Kolbach, long time no speak.
Good evening, Mayor Lehman and members of the Planning Committee and staff. I have a quick question. I'm wondering, can we, I have comments and I've actually submitted them in writing, but I'm wondering, is it possible to ask the planning staff a question just of a point of clarification, or should I just make my comments?
Unfortunately, we don't do Q&A in these meetings,
Okay.
So we'll just proceed with your comments if you could. Thanks.
Okay. Kathy Kolbach, 97 Cumberland Street in Allendale. Also co-chair of the Allendale Neighborhood Association, and I also sit on the on the Heritage Barrie Advisory Committee. So obviously from the perspective of being a resident, a homeowner, representing many homeowners and representing the heritage character of neighborhoods around the city, we do have concerns. I'm not going to go into all of them. I like what I'm seeing, to be quite honest. In support of a lot of it. There were a couple of questions around or comments around basements, and I understand, I think, why we wouldn't do that, because I think that we'd end up with 2 units, not just one. So in the case of and we've had this happen in our neighborhoods, where there's been a story or a bungalow or a single story with a 2-story building that almost looks larger than the size of the primary building. And that is very concerning to people in the neighborhood. People in all residents, not just in historic neighborhoods, all wards across the city. People bought their single family homes in residential neighborhoods with that in mind. They didn't buy into a condo or an apartment building or a townhouse. They are not the ones that are, wanting to, be crowded. However, having said that, I do agree that we could support some accessory. Right now we have many, and if you refer back to the location of new affordable housing that was outlined in one of the reports, it talks about the cumulative numbers of second suites by ward as being since 2018 or pre-existing 2018 to current, we have 1,650 second suites. Now, these are the ones that are registered. These are not the ones that are, and we know there are many that are not registered. I know in my own neighborhood that probably 50% of Ellendale is second suites. And the owners or the developers don't live in these buildings, and they don't live in the accessory buildings. So we do have concerns, and I agree with what others have said. I have also a notice from 2 other homeowners, and I have forwarded to Shelby their written submissions as well. And I think realistically, most people have covered everything. So I'm not going to go into too much more detail, but I think it's really important that we do, if there is a committee struck, that neighborhood associations or residents are a part of the solution. I think the city's come up with a very good solution, and if we're actually going to have affordable housing, it has to be affordable. So putting in a 2 or a 3 bedroom unit or a 2-story unit that becomes the size of the primary house is not affordable. And as Jen Van Genup mentioned, these units are currently renting for, $1,800, $2,000 a month. That's not affordable. So I thank you for your time, and I just want to make sure that Shelby got the 3 emails that we sent from neighbors, and thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Ms. Colbatch. Ms. White, can we confirm that correspondence was received?
Hi, Mayor Lehman. Yes, I have received some correspondence from Kathy. I will follow up with her directly to make sure I've received everything that was sent to me.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker tonight, sorry, going back to my list, is Scott Joyce, and Scott's in the call. So, Mr. Joyce, welcome to Planning Committee.
Yes, can you hear me okay there?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Mayor Lehman and members of Planning Committee and planning staff. My address is 121 Livingstone West here in Barrie. And thank you very much for the opportunity to provide some input on this issue, and thank planning staff also for the clear and concise presentation that was given earlier tonight. My comments relate to the detached accessory dwelling units, and in particular basements. I understand again that basements are not going to be permitted, and that habitable space will not be permitted in basements. And I guess I would kind of respectfully ask that that be reconsidered. I would like to build one of these detached accessory dwelling units within the next year, and to provide an affordable housing unit within the city, and also to offset my mortgage and housing expenses. And a property that my family already has an interest in slopes down towards the rear of the lot and would be ideal for a walkout type basement. And having a walkout, or permitting a walkout basement and allowing habitable living space within a basement would provide additional living space with lots of natural sunlight, and provide room, of course, for a furnace, hot water tank, water softener, air conditioning, those types of things, as well as laundry and storage space. We all seem to need more storage space nowadays, and also, very importantly, to provide a safe second exit from the house. I guess my second point is that I understand that that these detached accessory dwelling units will be limited to 45% of the principal building size. And in my case, I guess the existing bungalow that's on the lot is fairly small and would only permit an accessory dwelling unit of about 540 square feet. So without permitting a basement, or without permitting a walkout basement, it may not be financially feasible or viable from my perspective. And while I understand that there is some concern around maybe illegal second units being built within these detached accessory dwelling units, I suggest that I think that can be dealt with through bylaw enforcement using the existing laws that are already in place. So in conclusion, I would respectfully request that basements be permitted and habitable living space be permitted in the basement, particularly within walkout basements, for the reasons that I provided, and also to provide a safe second ground level access. That concludes my kind of brief presentation, and I also did send in written comments as well there earlier today. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Joyce, and for your written comments. And just so all those on the call are aware, everything that is received by staff by way of correspondence, we did receive a large number of emails and other written correspondence, and it is circulated to all members of committee. So thanks for being here, Mr. Joyce. Next, we have Pastor Jay Davis. Pastor Jay, welcome to Planning Committee.
Hello, Planning Committee. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate your time and energy. I've enjoyed the conversations of the many folks in town doing business, and I'm, I guess, speaking a little bit more on behalf of the affordable housing project regarding Holly Homes and the building of a structure that I believe will certainly be an asset for the city. Jeff, you're aware, we've been around for a long time now. Maple View Community Church, we've always sought for ways to participate in the community and giving back in some kind of way. And so over the years, we've always wanted to do that. Well, right now we have this very unique situation with Holly Homes and the property that we own, the 18 acres that we have come to have and to own. And this opportunity has arisen for us to sever off, I suppose, a piece of that property and make it available for low income housing. I'm excited because this isn't anything to do with profit or for us personally. I mean, that's not true. We are receiving resources, but we're sharing in the funding of this project by making the land more available at a cost that is probably better for the whole project to get going and to capitalize. But at the same time, we're excited to be able to have the opportunity to provide locations for those less fortunate in our community. So, I mean, I've listened, I've read over all the amendments. Because I'm not a businessman or looking to put a small apartment or all the different dwellings there, but more looking for how can I assist and how can Holly Home. So I'm excited about the Holly Home project, Jeff. I'm imagining everybody, city council, are aware at some level of discussions regarding the 300 Maple View portion of land there and trying to get it going. So I don't have a whole lot to say, amazing enough, except that I'm excited about what the city appears to be doing. I'm in favor of affordable housing. I'm just ecstatic that maybe we can have a part to play in that. And I just want to applaud your efforts and energies, gentlemen and women. And, this is a very hard time. I know personally, from my personal standpoint, as the congregation grows, the needs within our city and the needs of older saints needing a place to stay become more and more challenging. With the growth of the multicultural side of things, we're excited to see that occur in our assembly as well, but there's whole lots of needs there. So I'm not sure what I can do, but I certainly am in favor of making available affordable housing right now in Barrie. And I'd throw my hat in the ring for any way I can help, especially when it comes to some of the Holly Home housing units that are being proposed. And I just very grateful. You know, I find myself in between a lot of projects right now on the east of us and on the west of us and all over. And so, but I'm excited about it. I think it's great for the city. I love the city. I've been here now 25 years. Just incredible. You know, it was growing when I got here, but this is an exciting time for sure. I don't envy all of your decisions and challenges. But that's part of why you've stepped into these roles. But I want to support the Holly Home and the Affordable Housing Project all I can. In specific, the one that is going to be referred to, I think, at some point in time in this session. So, anyways, thank you for allowing me just to say a few thoughts. We're appreciative of everything going on with you guys, and certainly want to see some more affordable housing for our people. Get finding places to stay. So blessings upon all of you, and that's about all I have to say. J. Davis, 300 Mapleview Drive, Barrie, Ontario, with the soccer field.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here tonight, Pastor Jay, and for those remarks. And next tonight we have Angela Baldwin. Welcome to Planning Committee, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, members of council or members of committee. Can you hear me? Yes, thank you. So I'm a land use planner with Baldwin Planning and Development Consultants, and I have a keen interest in affordable housing. So some of you know I was involved with Redwood Park communities, assisting them with Lucy's Place, and also with the proposed affordable housing project on Lily and Crescent, which will have 12 affordable housing units. And that's gone through site plan. We've started construction. You know, very exciting projects for the community. And I'm here to speak in support of the proposed zoning amendment, specifically related to section 8.0, which would allow residential uses in the institutional zone. I think this is a really creative, novel way to allow additional lands to be used for affordable housing. So a lot of these large faith-based properties in the community have additional lands that just like Mapleview Community Church, and I am providing planning consulting services on a volunteer basis, along with a number of other professional consultants in the community. We've formed a team. We're working with Holly Home Corporation, working with Pastor Jay and the members of the Mapleview Community Church at 300 Mapleview Drive. So we're proposing an affordable housing project in the form of an apartment on those lands. And we have gone to pre-consultation, and staff was very helpful, very encouraging, I think, with the project. And what would really assist is this proposed language that would allow residential uses as a permitted use in the institutional zone. Because what happens with these projects is for them to come about, there has to be a combination of you know, support from the municipality, which we think you have given in a lot of very creative ways. Number one, with the CIP, providing development charge credits, providing credits related to planning application fees, building permit fees. All of those are huge, they're hugely beneficial to these projects, because that allows some of the costs to be deferred or not have to be paid up front. And you know, these are a lot of volunteers and just, you know, people who are keenly interested in helping in the community. So, you know, we certainly thank you for that. But another component is, you know, there'll be some private fundraising, but also requests for funding from federal government or provincial government sources. And one of the factors that moves your project forward is whether the lands are already zoned for housing. So to have this in place would be a huge benefit for this project and for, I'm sure, others that will come forward. I know I had a discussion with the planning department, and we talked about, I think that one of the future prospects for affordable housing is on institutional lands that, either they're faith-based groups, because it fits into their ideology of helping others in the community. And, there are good lands available on locations that are close to transit routes, parks, shopping, etc. So it ticks off a lot of the boxes. So I want to thank staff. I think this is really creative, and we're certainly excited to keep moving forward with this project. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Baldwin, and thank you for being here tonight to give us those comments. Our next speaker is Sergey, and I'm sorry, did we get Sergey's last name? Probably did. Sergey Somov, there we are. Mr. Somov, welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you. Can you just confirm you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We just need your address for the record in the meeting.
I don't live in Barrie. I'm just looking to buy something in the Barrie right now at the moment. Is that okay to give my comments?
Yep, we just need your address wherever you do live.
Okay, I live in Oakville. It's 2353 Grand Ravine.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of agree on some of the comments about, and I just want to provide some comments on minimum suite size, considered to be 699 square foot. I do have a bungalow actually in Burlington, and I created additional suite in the basement, and they do have requirements as well, like 40% of a maximum floor, like gross floor area. And that created a unit, like roughly 650 units. And with that, I was able to create a 2-bedroom, but it doesn't have like a kitchen. There's a there's a living room, but there is no, sorry, the kitchen is there, but no dining room. It has a living room, kitchen, and 2 kind of smaller size bedrooms. And I had to do that because of this requirement. And the people who are living there, the tenants, I just feel that they're cramped there without having a proper, let's say, dining room. They have a kitchen table right in the middle of a dining room, sorry, in the middle of a living room. My apologies for mixing the terms. It just creates a kind of a cramped space for a family living in this environment. And I was on one of the committee of adjustment of the city of Burlington, where one lady was asking for exemption for this minimum requirement, and they kind of agreed that this kind of archaic requirement to be reconsidered, because it does create a really kind of uncomfortable space for people to live in, and it really limits who can live in this space. Kind of concur to with the previous comments. It really limits who can rent this space and live in there. It's really like either you build a 1-bedroom apartment, which is just either a single parent, because where you're gonna place a child like anybody above, like let's say 5 or 7 years old, needs their own bedroom, or a young couple, once they're married, they have no real options other than to move out and start looking for something else. And as a final remark, I want to say is creating a minimum restriction for the unit size. It creates that anything above this minimum will be hard to find, and it will come at a premium, which really goes against kind of affordability housing. Kind of my final comment on that. I do appreciate your time taking my comment, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Soma, for your comments and your experience on that. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers? Do we see Adam or Jordan?
Mayor Lehman, we have no more speakers, and Adam and Jordan have not returned to the call.
Okay, well, I guess that means we are through our speakers. I will just, I'll make one final call for anyone else who's watching who wishes to make comments tonight. 797-5353 is the number to call, or cityclerks@barrie.ca to get the instructions on how to join. With that, I will ask if members of Planning Committee have questions of clarification of staff. Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. To the appropriate staff member, could you provide clarity as to why a basement component to these accessory suites hasn't been considered from the get-go? Yes, I know the answer of this is all an evolution of a process. It's going to come in September. There have been plenty of opportunities at this meeting for public and stakeholders to give input, and in the future. But I'm wondering, 1 and 2 stories, that's starting point. Basements are off the table. I'm sure there's a planning perspective on it. I'm just kind of curious because I'm just kind of missing that right now.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales, thank you for the question. And it's a combination of what we're seeing in these detached units where the basements are being proposed, and the ability for those basements to actually be another unit and the safety related to that. And so ultimately, we're trying to stop the ability for someone to even construct something that could eventually be turned into a second suite in the second suite.
Thank you, Ms. Manford, for that answer. Would it be possible, would that concern be mitigated if, for example, moving forward, again, a process that evolves, maybe the city adopts 1 stories, takes 2 stories off the table completely, especially for height and privacy concerns from the neighbors, but then the compromise is 2 stories are off the table. However, unless you're above a detached garage, makes sense, or an attic in the main unit. However, by taking the 2nd story off an accessory unit, it then brings the basement back into the table, and at site plan with construction permits, proper egress windows, entrances, those kind of things can be brought on the table. Is that a possibility, or does planning staff still see merit to 2 stories and lots of concern with bringing the basements, putting them on the consideration list?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales. As we've heard about this comment quite a bit through the public meeting, like everything, staff are going to take back all the comments, and we'll definitely look at the feedback, and the response to that will be considered in the recommendation report to staff, or to council.
Okay, perfect. I've got another question. I'm just trying to pull it up here, what I wrote. So considering that we are considering our official plan moving forward for how the city is going to grow, is there anything at this present time that staff is considering to prevent houses on intensification corridors and any streets that are really prime for strategic development, to prevent them from being allowed to create accessory units? And why I'm asking the question is the following. Current homeowners on one of those, whatever is adopted in DOP, we haven't adopted it, so we don't know what it's going to look like. But say something on intensification corridor, something on kind of a main road, if they build it, it's just going to make the market's response to natural land assemblies harder, because now those units will cost more. Those units, it might make the numbers not work, especially if somebody's doing, say a land assembly at the bottom of Bayfield or something, or on ESSA or on Yonge Street, something like that. So I'm wondering if it's staff intention to limit the creation of accessory units in the short term, knowing that the hope is that the market responds and puts more efficient density, better density on those roads that are identified through our OP.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales. For the most part, staff are looking to permit 2nd and 3rd suites throughout the municipality. So at this point, if they're on a public road, the proposed policies would allow for 2nd and 3rd suites in most cases.
Okay, perfect. And the final question, from a zoning perspective, is there any way for, let's say resident X, they're saying, okay, they're going to do a garden suite or an accessory suite. They come in, they go to Apley, they're getting their paperwork done, and the city of Barrie goes, is there any way to limit them from building an accessory unit if it's a house that has had historical and detailed concerns and property standards? So if somebody, and we're not talking just visits, hey, cut the lawn was cut within the 24 hours, 48 hours. We're talking like major tickets, major offenses, or would that be just from a legal perspective, that wouldn't be possible? And I'm just talking about if the property stays in the same hands. Obviously, if that person sells the house, the person who buys it probably would be extremely unfair that they would also be limited. But I'm wondering if from a legal perspective, a zoning perspective, and a planning perspective, something like that could be considered, especially for residents that we're hearing. We heard from the Ward 1 Association. We're hearing from different people in Allendale, different concerns that the problem is already bad enough as it is, and they can't even imagine even more density in some of those existing problematic houses.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales, it's my understanding that property standards complaints would not stop the city from accepting a complete building permit application.
Okay, I'll follow up with legal to see what's that. Thank you, Ms. Manfield.
Other questions of clarification? Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I guess maybe my question's for Ms. White. On the third slide, or actually sixth slide, you said one of the changes coming was to prevent removal of residential units when it would create a zoning compliance issue. I'm just not sure what that meant. Could you clarify what that means? What's that aimed at?
Through Mayor Lehman to Deputy Mayor Ward, happy to clarify that for you. So currently there are some permissions in section 4.4 of the bylaw that allow the removal of residential units. So an example of this would be if we had an existing triplex or 3-unit dwelling in an RM2 zone, you would be permitted to remove those dwelling units and turn it back into a single unit under the bylaw, even though that's not permitted by the RM2 zone today. So it's probably the easiest way to kind of explain it with an example. So right now, those permissions are sort of unique to removing residential units. And this would be looking at kind of eliminating that option so that we could preserve those rental units in these sort of smaller multiplex situations.
Okay, thank you. My other question had to do with the accessory units over garages. I know right now they're not, accessory units have to be in the backyard. Does that pertain to the garage you want as well, or could it be beside the house, or does it have to be in the backyard?
Through Mayor Lehman to Deputy Mayor Ward. So the requirements would still say that they cannot be permitted in the front yard. So that would allow them potentially in the side yard if there was appropriate setbacks and they could be accommodated. But they would have to be behind the main front facing wall of the dwelling is sort of where we define where the front yard begins. But it would allow them potentially in side yards, provided they could comply with all of the other required setbacks that are being proposed, including that driveway length. Okay.
Yeah, 6 meters back from the road. Last question is and it's the same thing. These permits, secondary dwelling units, what's the name of it? Detached accessory dwelling units. They permit them up to 700 square feet. Do we have any rules governing how big a garage can be? Are there any, or can they be built that big? I mean, that would be a really big garage. So do we have any rules in the city of Barrie covering how big a garage can be on a property?
Through Mayor Lehman. So currently the cap on accessory structures is set as the percentage of the property. So 10% of the property is what would be capped at per the zoning bylaw.
For a garage or for a detached dwelling unit?
For any detached accessory structures on a property, okay. Cumulatively, they can add up to a total of 10% of the lot coverage. So that would include things like detached garages, sheds, pool houses, as well as detached accessory dwelling units. So that's the zoning requirements. As far as whether there's anything additional in the building code, would be taken care of by our friends in the building department.
Okay, sorry, one last question has raised that. Is that 10% for each dwelling, for each detached building, or total for the entire property?
Total cumulative for the entire property.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Councillor Kungle, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to staff, be it Ms. White or Ms. Banfield. So for those watching tonight too, and in the comments and when we're talking a bit about the zoning, could you share more about how changes that we put into this particular piece, how they get understood by committee of adjustment? I'm still seeing many situations with residents having an accessory suite that are going in that seem to move to committee of adjustment, and a lot of questions still from the public about where's the line with how we build based on the zoning bylaw versus up to what point can we potentially expect changes when they go to committee of adjustment. And I'm seeing a lot of confusion, anxiety, and angst about changes that are actually happening at that stage of a process that's permitted for residents to go to for variances.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle. So there are very specific tests for minor variances to be considered. So what we're here tonight is to kind of set those parameters for the zoning bylaw that are going to apply across the municipality. And so for the minor variance, the conformity, kind of the general intent and conformity to the official plan, general intent and conformity to the overall intent of the zoning bylaw. So clearly they can't meet the bylaw because that's why they're going for a variance, but what's the purpose of it? So even using any of these examples here tonight, what was the purpose of having a 3-meter side yard setback proposed? What's the whole intent of these things, as well as, is it minor in nature and is it appropriate for the development of the property and in that context? So, ultimately, these are the standards that we're testing right now through a public process, and the expectation is that they are going to work these standards for most of the situations. That will not preclude people from coming for a minor variance for particular sites that for whatever reason can't seem to meet these standards, but the intent is that these are going to be new bylaw standards that have been vetted through a public process and ultimately approved by council, and the intent is that in most cases these standards will be able to be met.
Go ahead, Councillor Kungle.
So just in supplement to that, if I may, Ms. Banfield, and thank you for that. So, I want to kind of quell where I can any anxiety with residents to say, great, for those that support what's being proposed, but is it going to be an end run? And I only use that around, will it incentivize the use of our committee of adjustment in some way? Or within your comments, are you saying that this will also reset what should be reasonable and viewed as reasonable around the intent of the build? Or do we have or would ever consider ceilings or very formal ceilings about how far an approval could go around committee of adjustment? Just for those watching.
Sure, through you, Mayor Lehman. So again, the idea is that these standards that we're hearing about tonight would be the reset, if you will, would be, as I said, a very current public process looking at these standards that would then be implemented through a zoning bylaw. So it is the intent that it's the reset. There are no parameters for minor variances in terms of what the number is, because in some instances the same number can be appropriate on one site and the exact same number can be inappropriate on another site. So that's where the 4 tests come in. And ultimately it's, staff does make a recommendation on those 4 tests. Often applicants will have a planning consultant make a recommendation on those 4 tests. And those are the 4 tests that the Committee of Adjustment consider.
That's great. Thank you for that. I have no further questions.
Thanks. I saw Councillor Riepma and Councillor Harvey. We do have several more folks that have asked to speak tonight. So I will just ask if there's any other members of Planning Committee who have additional questions or clarification. Okay, Councillor Riepma and then Councillor Harvey, and then we will go back to our public members of the public.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll make it quick. I guess the one question I have for Ms. Banfield is, do we have any rules about how many people can live in a unit? So we're going to have now, 3 3 units on a property, do we have a limit on how many people can live in each unit?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Riepma, no, we do not. There is no limit on the number of people in a unit.
I guess, I mean, it does help our population intensification, but it seems to me that what we end up with is the potential, and I'm saying that the potential, but it's also in Ward 1. We definitely experience this where we have 5 or 6 people living per unit, which means that we have 18 people living on a lot. And even if half of them have cars, so that was going to be my next question is, how many parking spaces are we looking at requiring here?
Through your Mayor Lehman to Councillor Riepma, it's 1 parking space per unit.
Okay. And where are we parking all the other cars? Maybe that's a rhetorical.
I'm not sure. I was just going to say, I'm not sure if that's a question.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Riepma, but certainly an issue that staff can address in the report as they come back with this. We do have 3 more speakers tonight who called in just at the tail end of the other speakers there. And first is Shannon Murray. Ms. Murray, welcome to Planning Committee. No, we can't hear you yet.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman and members of Planning Committee.
Yep.
My name is Shannon Murray, and I'm a local realtor. I focus on investing. I'm with Remax Hallmark, and my address is 152 Bayfield Street. Thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to hear what other members of the public and other fellow investors I'm aware of, what they had to say. And I would just like to add, if I may, I did email Shelby, and thank you for that opportunity. And I just want to retract that initially I had said I fully opposed what was being proposed. But now after listening and reviewing, I'd like to retract that in terms of not having a full opposition. And in terms of how, you know, I'd like to say kudos regarding the institutional consideration that, of course, a prestige colleague as well spoke to Angela. And I think that the institutional opportunity to be considered would be very good. However, in terms of, I work with a lot of investors, and they're not just investors, they're actually housing providers and people that care. And one most notably that I can think of, there's actually a handful of them. And what they do is they work very closely with Women and Children's Shelter and Redwood and help in transitional housing. So I would like to ask if it's possible to reconsider the size that is being proposed in addition to the parking. When, you know, we're looking at the parking right now, it can be very challenging, especially if there is already a sidewalk. And with the quality housing providers that I work with and consult with specifically, you know, those are women who are fleeing abuse and they are in transitional housing. And, you know, a detached standalone, if you take a look at how they are being built in behind, and sometimes they're, you know, they're not very open, you know, it can be very private and very lovely, actually. If I was a single mom way back when, it's something that I would actually, you know, be proud to actually, you know, call home while I was in transition. But we also have to remember that some of these single parents or these single mothers, they're not always just little ones that require daycare. Sometimes, I mean, they could be a young adult, and with a young adult, they are working and they could have a vehicle. And, you know, as you're aware, the city of Barrie, though I love to live, work, and play here, it is a very car-dependent city, and it is very challenging with the walk score in some of the areas. So I just wanted to just add my voice to this, that if it's possible to please, before a decision is made, I would encourage if the planning committee could take the offers of previous speakers and perhaps offer an invitation for others for additional consultation. And how can we make this a win-win? And again, I applaud the city and taking the ball and running with it and just offering this opportunity, because the last year or so with the challenges of the pandemic and just watching what some of these housing providers have been able to do in order to offer opportunities for some of these women has basically been a new lease on life. And, for them to see that it's just a step up as they're in transition in their next stage of their life. So I really do sincerely ask that you take into consideration, like I said, the offers, and perhaps we can all come to a great opportunity to comply with what is being out there and help those people who don't really understand the importance of what some of us are trying to do. So thank you very much for hearing my words, and have a good night.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mary, for your comments tonight, for being here. Our next speaker is Peter Rutkowskis. Peter, welcome to Planning Committee. And I think you're still on mute.
Can you hear me okay now?
Now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks so much for taking my call. I hadn't actually planned on calling, but I was, to be honest, really upset that we're not hearing from the neighbors who are affected by these suites. And I was concerned with the amount of investors who have called, who have a real interest in seeing these being built. From what I've seen in the paper, there's a lot of very upset neighbors in our community, and I don't think their voices are being presented tonight for whatever reason. Also, I know the planning department has received a lot of concerns from residents, and I have not really heard much about that this evening either. I can only speak from recent and ongoing experience in our backyard second dwelling being built behind our house, and I know I can speak for the neighbors as well on our street. I should have said also I'm calling from 94 Oren Boulevard in the Livingston area. We have concerns with size restrictions. I noticed that the first two contributors tonight were from builders. Their motivation is out of investment and generating return. I'm not against anyone making a profit. However, in this case, it's completely counter to any neighborhood interests. The larger they can build, the more they can rent for. That doesn't contribute to affordable housing. Most builders, both builders even acknowledge that some units would just not be possible with the new restrictions. That should tell you that some of these units that are being built should not be built, and they're being built into places that don't have room for them. With regards to privacy, the current bylaw seems to allow the second unit to be within, I believe, 0.6 meters of the fence, or 2 feet. With the height allowance, the single story overlooks directly into neighborhood backyards, and in some cases into neighboring bedroom windows. The neighbor's property, our neighbor's property, simply doesn't have room for a dwelling, yet one is being built. There will be absolutely no green space with regards to aesthetics, but also to access. With regards to construction concerns, there have been these are actually quite large-scale construction projects on very small residential streets. The other day, we had our street almost completely blocked off with construction vehicles. The city's response was very slow to rectify this. Half our street was also blocked, creating a hazard for traffic flow, and more importantly, for any possible emergency response. I wasn't able to let my children even go around the block because they would have had to use the street in between cement trucks, as they could not use the sidewalk. With regards to absentee landlords, I've seen in the paper that other locations have experienced Toronto-based landlords who have no interest in the health of a Barrie neighborhood. It's a great investment for them and probably an excellent return versus building in Toronto. I'm not looking forward to the eventuality of the backyard suite behind us becoming a rental to an absentee landlord. In fact, you had a call this evening from an Oakville investor. What is his interest in the Barrie community other than generating income? Investors wish to build the maximum allowable footprint, and that's only good for them. With regards to neighbor concerns, I called concerned to understand how this fits into the city's planning bylaws. I was concerned with the sheer size of the unit for both privacy, but also with regards to runoff. I'm concerned with the amount of hardscape in the backyard and where all that water will go. In our case, the neighbor's yard can only run off into our yard and that of our neighbors. When I brought this up to city planning, I was not given any assurance that drainage concerns had or will be addressed. So am I to wait until there's an issue, or should there be a proper plan in place before I experience flooding due to my neighbor's new build? The total lot coverage is completely unreasonable. Is there any vehicle set up to practically enforce and address neighbor concerns? I'm almost done, and thank you for your time. The neighborhood health. These units do not contribute any sense of neighborhood or community. As a previous caller said, they cram people into a space that is not designed for that many people, traffic, services, or emergency response. As someone said earlier tonight, people bought their homes in a single family home neighborhood with that expectation. These units do nothing for the neighbors, only benefiting the builder and investor. The homeowner who builds them benefits from an increased home value, an investor benefits from profit, and all the neighboring properties lose value in their home with no benefit to them. I would encourage council to include affected residents for specific input from the community going forward with any planning. I would be happy to make myself available, in fact. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And I know you did give us your address at the start, Peter. Just to be clear, actually, we'll have about 20 speakers, I think, by the end of this. And there were some who are residents of neighborhoods as well. I think we're actually getting a good diversity of opinions tonight, but all different perspectives. People are making the point tonight and offering to help city staff with getting the regulations right, although they may not always agree given those different perspectives. So I'll just reiterate that tonight is just the start of the process on this amendment. And please do correspond with the file planner, Shelby White, to make sure your views are known. The staff reports now, under the way Ontario planning works, must cover all of the issues that have been, all the substantive issues that have been raised, and report back on what was heard at the public meeting. But we certainly welcome the input of everybody with direct experience, it or both. Our last speaker is Scott Boyer. There you are. Mr. Boyer, welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, councilors. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Like Mr. Rutka, I was concerned about the lack of representation of, let's call it the parties that are most directly affected in an adverse way at times, and many times, by the presence of second suites, ancillary suites, and rentals. I recognize we do have a housing crisis in Barrie, and the second suites provides a solution, but it's not the only solution. And I would prompt council to consider alternatives to this. This is based on some of the experiences and conversations that I've had with local residents. I must say that the vast majority of existing residents in neighborhoods don't want, as I've experienced in conversation with them, the proliferation of second suites and ancillary suites, particularly those who would have one be set up beside them. So that is the opinion of many of current residents, just through conversation with them. I've found, again, by direct experience, that the proliferation, or put it this way, and I would speak to the one previous speaker who said we shouldn't, he sort of discounted that you can't consider or take a point of view of the impact of the worst residents who might be occupying such suites. Well, I say you must, because as these suites proliferate, there's a greater opportunity for, let's say, bad actors, whether they be landlords or whether they be occupants, to occupy these suites. And like the old adage, one bad apple can spoil the whole barrel. I've seen and experienced, as have many others in our neighborhoods, one bad actor, depending on the type of bad action or behaviors they have, can foster the infestation of rats to properties. And yes, rats, that's been reported by one bad acting property nearby, that I have heard anecdotally, again, reports from other neighbors from previous experiences. One bad actor with a loud car at 3 a.m. can be heard by a whole street and wake up people who are trying to gain sleep in preparation for work the next day. One bad actor can put the safety of children and people at risk by driving at excessive speed. And the list goes on. This second suites are also somewhat insidious, in my view, on the negative side. As these proliferate, once they're in place for a long time, perhaps forever. And again, increasing the risk of bad actors. I guess that's the negative side that many residents are concerned about in their neighborhoods. They can act counter to the concept of resilient, healthy, and vital neighborhoods that we all want. So I guess the last thing I would like to say is a bit provocative and directed to the developers and the realtors who might have been on the call, that if you're so concerned about the affordability of housing, I would invite you to show some leadership in this socially intense subject, and reduce the price of your old inventory for rental, and help relieve some of the affordability issues in that manner. Thank you very much for my opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Mr. Boyer. Appreciate those comments here tonight. And we do have one more speaker, Adam Mobbs, who was earlier in our list and had to drop off. Mr. Mobbs is back online. I see you there. Welcome to Planning Committee, Mr. Mobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the committee. I did tune in earlier and I just listened to so many fabulous comments and diversity of different opinions, and everything I had in my notebook has been covered. So thank you very much.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Adam, for that. And just a reminder to everybody who's still on the call, because I know we have a number of attendees, please do email your comments to shelby.white@barrie.ca, who is the file planner on this issue. With that, I will declare the public meeting concluded, and we will just quickly ask if there are any inquiries from members of Planning Committee to planning staff on tonight's call. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I just want to expand on the parking issue that Councillor Rietma brought up, because I know several parts of our city, even prior to a second suite, let alone a third suite being put onto a property. There's several parking issues, especially during the winter time when you can't park on the road and several vehicles are up on front lawns and everything else. What measures can staff put in place to ensure that the location that is being sought after for a second or third suite is not already a parking issue?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey, for any second suite or detached suite permit that comes in, staff make sure that the parking is provided. It has to be a parking space of the required size. It can't just be like this, oh, we're going to park here and it's going to be a smart car kind of thing. So all those standards have to be taken into account before zoning will sign off on the building permit.
Yeah. I guess the issue I'm trying to raise is people might apply for these things, try and tell you they've only got 1 or 2 vehicles when in fact they've already got 4 vehicles. Is there anything that we can put in place to expose that prior to a further issue of potentially vehicle 5, 6, and 7 having to find somewhere to be?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey, I'm going to jump in here and just say that, you know, what Ms. Banfield has indicated is that our standards in the bylaw are what we have to start with, and then it becomes an enforcement issue. And I think you're absolutely right. We recognize that people may be saying one thing and doing another thing, and that is a challenge. But under the Planning Act, we have to go by the standards that are set in the bylaw for the land use that is being proposed. And then it really becomes a matter of enforcement. And I think that some of the things that we're trying to deal with through these amendments are to ensure that the enforcement issues that we are currently experiencing throughout the city are not exacerbated by some of these proposals. But definitely we can take a look at what else we can do, but generally it's an enforcement matter.
Great. And just one other question when it comes to these detached suites. I know obviously they have to have separate plumbing and wastewater hookups. Now, when it comes to things like water meters and hydrometers, will they be separated or will it be tied into the original dwelling?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey, it's my understanding that most times to a detached unit, it's a separate metered service.
Okay, great. Thanks. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Definitely interesting discussion and hearing the difference in opinion from those advocating for affordable housing, which is one of the primary motivations of these changes, and those who shared that they have been investing in second suites and auxiliary units. And I noted the numbers and the Affordable Housing Monitoring Report that talks about how these second suites actually haven't made an impact on the affordability of housing to date. It's actually decreased over the last 3 years or since we've had these suites being built in Barrie. So just kind of curious, certainly we want to see the developers who've been here today continue to add units because we know that supply is an important item. But we also want to see the affordability of units continue to be actually that affordable. So I'm just curious if you could give us a little bit of maybe more description of the decision of how to kind of strike that balance has been come to in these provisions. And I did hear Ms. Thinganup, who's certainly an authority in affordability. And I think the people that many of the people that she would be representing would be people who would be very, very much struggling with income security and might be on disability pensions and those kind of other income sources, and really need those one bedrooms that are really at an affordable rate. So I wonder if you could just give me a little bit of kind of detail on how we got to this as it relates to that balance of affordability and really hopefully getting to those who are really most marginalized and who are struggling to get into the housing market, to be housed, period, let alone to be able to get into the housing market. That's a great statement there, but to get into housing, period. So thank you. Sorry, maybe that was maybe Ms. Banfield, or I saw Ms. Wood.
For sure, nope, for sure. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris. So there's just a couple of things at play. So one is Bill 108, that is a provincial directive to increase the provision really of housing, increase that stock piece of it, and that's through second suites and third suites. And so there's that element of the equation. And then it's our own City of Barrie housing, affordable housing strategy that recognized second suites as being a part of that, not the only affordable answer, if you will, but a part of that. And you're right, the affordable housing monitoring report for those second suites that are unfunded, and by the unfunded, it's through partnership programs with, say, the County of Simcoe, to allow for long-term affordability. So I think it's a combination of, some of the second suites are affordable for sure through the funding programs. Some are not necessarily affordable, but there is a supply piece to it. Bill 108 requires us to have these provisions to allow for them, but set up the standards that we're talking about. And then some of the elements that are included in the amendment this evening tied to restricting the size really is tied to trying to make the units more affordable overall. So understanding both sides of the story that we're hearing, but certainly smaller units tend to rent for less money. I think that's a piece that we could most likely all agree on. So as I said, it's not the only thing, but it certainly is one element of that full range of housing, the full range of affordable housing that is tackled not only at the provincial level, but also with the county, and then our own municipal affordable housing strategy.
Right, thank you, Ms. Banfield. And just curious, and always good to learn from those who've gone down the road before, is there a community that we've referenced or in literature that we've seen who's gone through this and found a way out to manage both the affordability crisis and the "you're changing my neighborhood" character impact that comes with it? Balancing new development, put the intensity in new areas. Are there places in the world that have done this well, or places in North America or maybe even Canada for a good reference?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris. I mean, a lot of municipalities are dealing with this issue right this minute, to be honest. And the town of Innisfil just recently looked at it, as well as Shelby. I don't know whether you want to chime in, but definitely Shelby in her research has looked at what other municipalities are doing.
Yeah, to add to what Ms. Banfield said. So there are a few different municipalities we're looking at. This is a very new legislation. A lot of places are going through adding in the detached units for the first time. Many places have had second suites for a number of years, but are really starting to tackle the concerns surrounding the detached accessory dwelling units. A few that we've been looking at are, so Kitchener just very recently passed some legislation. Hamilton has as well. A few others that are escaping me, but we are looking sort of near and far to different places to see what they're doing to try to encourage adding in more affordable units. And as Michelle noted, not just with regard to second suites and detached accessory dwelling units, we really wanted to take a look at the zoning bylaw in a more holistic way and address some opportunities for adding additional units into multiplexes or additional units in places like the institutional zones where they might make a lot of sense and complement some of the uses that are there. So we're seeing, for example, wanting to be able to integrate, subsidized housing units or social housing units and supportive units with more market rent, and being able to kind of have those costs contributing. It makes a lot of business sense is what we're hearing too.
Thank you. I'll cancel my curiosity for now. We're early on in the process and curb my enthusiasm, but thank you very much. This is a very important item for our city, so thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other inquiries of staff? Councillor Congo.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Ms. Banfield. Just a quick question for process for those watching tonight. So while we talk about this being the beginning stage, how soon would we see a potential change implemented? And are we taking a pause in any way on permitting secondary or accessory suites? I know we talked about the CIP program and 2 cycles of that we went through. That's for kind of one piece, I think, of our affordable housing strategy. But what can people expect around the process with the city if they're looking for permits while this is going on?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kunkel, thank you for the question. So first, this is the public meeting, and like all public meetings, it's to hear the feedback and to take it back, and for staff to come back to council with a planning recommendation report that we are intending to do most likely in the fall. And that would come back to a planning committee with a recommendation report. And then, as always, then the planning committee recommendations go to council, and council would be the opportunity for people to make a deputation either for or against that recommendation. As always, with the City of Barrie, any zoning bylaw change would happen at the following council meeting, and where appropriate, there'd be zoning bylaw appeal periods from the time of those passings of the bylaw. Although I will note that some aspects related to second suites and Bill 108 actually aren't appealable as part of the Planning Act, but you still have to pass the bylaw. So that's kind of one element of it. And the short answer is no. We are not stopping accepting permits this moment or in this transition period. So any permits that are applied for will continue to come in and will continue to be reviewed against the current proposals.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Banfield, any other inquiries of staff from members of committee? Okay, if not, that completes our agenda for Planning Committee tonight. Our next meeting is General Committee on the 21st, next Monday. So we will sign off for tonight, and we'll see you next Monday, everyone. Thank you very much. Good night.